Oh, it's time to get the microphone. Okay, here we are. We're live. Live in the microphone. You know what I just did? My chair is too short. Look at all that flotsam and jetsam here. Check it out. I've got a big pile of paper on my desk. I've got boxes I'm sorting back there. Typical day in my office. Now my chair is too tall. Okay, just right. Hey guys. Okay, so I guess I don't have to wear my reading glasses right now. This is what I look like with glasses on. Hi, Bobby. Off. I got these for $1 at the Dollar Tree. I'm actually wearing these puppies out. I haven't been to the Dollar Tree in a while to get another round, and yeah. Anyway. Okay, so it's time to record the show. Can't quite get my chair right. Oh. It's just been one of those days, hasn't it? I actually really debated about if I was going to live stream the recording of the podcast today. And then I was like, just do it, Nicole. So I did. And we do have a live stream tomorrow night with the holler neighbors. One of my neighbors left. Yeah. He took off. Island Mountain Pat, my next door neighbor, who won't be interrupting. He always comes in the middle of those. It's always fun to watch. But he's not going to be coming tomorrow because guess what? He's out. But maybe we'll be able to get the guy from my cabin up, Jeff. People kind of enjoyed seeing him on one of the Quarantined in the Holler episodes. I'll do another one of those soon. Hi, Josh. Okay, so I'm just going to get my podcast ready to record. I'll try to keep a semi-eye, half an eye, part of an eye on comments here because today's topic is how to start in wild foraging, how to get started with that. And I bet you guys will have lots of interesting insights on that. With that, I'm gonna start recording, and then hopefully I won't have to have a fight with my my coat when I say the wrong thing and try not to cuss. Or maybe you guys probably enjoy watching that part anyway, don't you? Okay, here we go. Well, welcome everyone to Living Free in Tennessee. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020, and this is episode 298 of Living Free in Tennessee. And it's a Wednesday, so I thought I'd do more of a how-to topic and went back and forth a bunch on this last night. I like to know at least the day before on this day's show what I'm going to talk about so I can think about it while I'm going to sleep, kind of wake up in the morning, think about it some more. Some topics require a little bit more research than others. Today, though, the show just wrote itself, and that's getting started in wild foraging. I've had a lot of questions about wild plants in the last few weeks, and there's a lot of stuff popping out right now. I mean, I've always said if I was going to have to live off the land in any state in the country, I think Tennessee's top of my list. I see those shows where they have people go live off the land in Alaska. No, there is so much abundance here for much of the year that if I'm going to get dropped somewhere without any supplies, this is the place I want to be. But the sad thing is we've forgotten which plants are edible and which ones aren't in our society. We've fostered a culture of fear around wild edible plants, as if merely by being the wild version of something, you shouldn't eat it. So you'll buy watercress in the store, but you won't eat it from a creek. Well, why? That doesn't make any sense. So today I'm going to talk about just getting started with building wild foraging into your life and becoming more confident in identifying the plants. Because none of us want to go out and eat hemlock, right? Because that would, make you die or something. So anyway, also it's a Wednesday. It's Holler Hat Wednesday. Where did she disappear to? And what in the world is that? You can find out over on Instagram at Nicole Sauce. And this is where I always pause the YouTube live stream because have I posted that picture yet? No, it's next on my to-do list. I really should reverse those things. But yeah, the Holler Hat's not in the Holler Hat picture this week. That's the big joke. It's kind of the fun part. Okay, we're going to go back to recording now. Also, tomorrow's webinar is basically I forgot the name of it, and I'm looking at my screen, and I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to just kind of go back. Going to edit that out. I know I'm talking about water gardens tomorrow at the Holler Homestead, but there's an actual title to that. Water gardening systems at the Holler Homestead. That's what it's called. Water gardening systems at the Holler Homestead. Okay, I know a lot of you have been wanting to hear about the water gardening systems, and I'm going like deep dive tomorrow. Now I got to tell this to listeners on my podcast. Also, tomorrow's webinar is water gardening systems at the Holler Homestead. I'm going to walk you through the various systems I've set up here, what's worked well, what has not worked well, right? And then also what we're doing moving forward. Now, I have to tell you guys, I'm not a hydro expert. I'm not an aquaponics expert. I've been maintaining an aquaponics system for about 3 years, got really into indoor lettuce growing this winter, and thankfully so, because we were eating off that while not going to the store to get some fresh greens. And then we've implemented seedling growing systems, microgreens, other things. I'm going to share with you everything I know. I'm going to have lists of what I specifically bought and links to them in the PowerPoint from the presentation. And I'm, to the best of my ability, going to show you up close what is going on here with the growing systems. And then I believe in the fall, once we've gone through a whole year of growing, we'll do a second webinar that's like, okay, how did it go from here? Because I have learned some things not to do, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to learn some more things not to do. That's tomorrow at 12 o'clock Central. This webinar is included with all membership levels. If you are not a member, it's $50 for the webinar, or you can become a member for $50. And then it's like you get more than one webinar. So it's kind of a better deal just to become a member. Just saying. Anyway, also tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central, we will do the live stream of the Holler Neighbors, and we're going to talk about finding purpose and or any other questions you want to ask. So if you just want to pop in and ask what my favorite, alligator meat preparation is, you can totally do that live stream. It's over on YouTube at 7 p.m. Both the links to the webinar and to YouTube are in the show notes. Finally, tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. is the live chat on MeWe. I haven't been talking about this every episode, but there's a pretty cool group of supportive people over on MeWe. That's MeWe.com. Just go over there, set up an account, apply to be added to the group. Sometimes it takes a few days for us to notice that we have pending invitations. It just depends on which admins are online when. I've been like nose to the grindstone this week and last week, so I haven't been logging in as much. And I've noticed like sometimes it takes us a day or two to approve. And plus, if you have a profile picture that's inappropriate, we're looking at you with side eye. So just think about that before you apply. And if you make up weird answers that are way too weird, we may have to ask some more questions. But in general, it's a great supportive group, especially if you're looking to build something. And then finally, we're honing in on the last few of the side hustle working groups. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. I have one. I only have 2 people signed up. I think I'm going to throw a third person in there if they have time. But that, like tomorrow at 9 a.m. is a good slot to get in, but you'll need to register before 9 a.m. Okay. In fact, I might need to change the setting because you might have to register today before midnight. Don't know. If you go to register, it's before 9 a.m. and you can't get in, email me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, and I'll just send you a direct link to the Zoom meeting. In order to attend this, you just need a computer and you'll install an app called Zoom, and then you join the audio through your computer. If you have a webcam, you can have your webcam on. That's always nice. If your internet won't support it, that's okay. Not the end of the day. I like to see people's happy faces, but sometimes the internet is not going to follow through on that. Okay, with that, it's time for our first segment, and that is Stump the Sauce. This one comes off the MeWe chat this morning. What in the world is this PPP thing? So that's not exactly how it was stated, but Ken over on MeWe asked my opinion on PPP, and that's like the Paycheck Protection Program. It's a mouthful. It's like Peter Piper pack to pack a pepple pa. Yeah, that's a big mouthful. Anyway, it's the Paycheck Protection Program, and it's part of the bailout money that got the $6 trillion that got approved by Congress, and now they're fighting over extending it. Last I heard, that was approved too, but maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was. But then Nancy Pelosi pulled something, and then Trump pulled something, and then, oh my gosh, I'm sick of politics. Are you sick of politics? Anyway, but program exists, and it was intended to help small businesses the Paycheck Protection Program was intended to help small businesses keep people on payroll. And it applies to sole proprietors. So if you are somebody who is a contractor, a sole proprietor, or you own a company, you can apply for these funds. The easiest way to apply is through your bank if they're still accepting applications, which many banks are not, because the program ran out of money last Thursday. And now it's next Thursday. And Congress is arguing about extending it and how to target it differently. And we're hearing stories about abuses where companies who don't need it got it and companies who do need it didn't, like there's all that mess. Just stop reading the opinions and start finding information. Some resources I found that were really helpful for this. One, the manager at my bank. So I qualify because I am a sole proprietor. I was last year. Now I'm an S corporation this year. And it's complicated for me because I was one business definition last year. I'm another business definition this year. So I called the manager of the bank and said, how does that work? Because, according to the bill that was signed, it is intended for people like me. But I don't know. And then I don't even know if I need it. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to work my butt off to earn as much money as possible during this, but what do I do? And so he said, well, in order for you to apply, you have to have your taxes for 2019 done because I also don't have W-2 income, so I can't just show payroll, right? So there's a couple different documents you're going to need, and it's what the government requires versus what your bank requires are a little bit different. Banks are tending to require more documentation because they don't want to be in the middle of a fraud scandal either. I know Chase is being sued and some other big banks are. I'm not sure that lawsuit is valid. They're accusing them of having put larger companies in front of smaller ones, and their justification for it is that many more small business loan applications went through in the latter part of the application window. But paycheck protection, and okay, let me finish that thought. And here's what I know. With all the reporting required by banks, a larger company has the staff to produce the reports. So I would expect that the larger companies got in first because they can, right? And, I could be wrong. I have a lot of faith in humanity, and that's part of my charm, right? Anyway, so the Paycheck Protection Program will give you 2.5 times your monthly salary as long as it's used on mortgage, utilities, and paying people. So you'd have to pay yourself with it. Once you get it, I don't know for how many months that is. I can't remember off the top of my head. But once you get it, you have 8 weeks to spend it. And it's up to $10,000 per person, I believe. Well, no, it's $100,000 per employee or so. I don't know. The numbers keep moving around, but they start with a $10,000 up maximum $10,000 check. However, small businesses like you and me with just one employee might get like 1,000, or they might get 10,000, or they might get $7,300. Like they figure it based on how much your payroll should have been. Okay. And then they've been kind of wildly changing from day to day about how much they're going to give per employee and in what scenario they're going to do that. And that's the paycheck protection. That's different. There's also a small business loan. It's EI something. I can't remember. That is a low interest loan that you can apply for. It's at 3 or 4%, and you have 30 years to pay it off. So it's like taking a mortgage out on your business to get through the year in other areas. So that would be, based on probably your 2019s. But the Paycheck Protection Act really gets, it's supposed to get fast money to companies. What's really happened, though, is they ran out of money and the money hasn't come through to a lot of people. One of my best sources for the information I've been getting is Ceterus, Ceterus, which is an accounting firm that handles small businesses. They had a daily webinar for like 2 weeks about this, and they were adding, letting people sign up for free and taking questions for free. And they had one of their staff members like dedicated to researching what's going on and keeping up with all the rules changes. So that's the program. That's how it works to apply. I actually haven't applied. And then here's the next part. You need to decide how you feel morally about this as a libertarian or as an anarchist or whatever you are. Or maybe you're none of those things. I don't know. So are you going to take money from the government or not? You've paid money in. So the pragmatic libertarian to me is like, I can get some of my money back, right? But then there's the do I really need it part? And then there's the I'm not taking anything from the government part because I want to maintain my independence. And what does this like open me up to as far as scrutiny? So that moral decision is one I think you have to make. I will tell you what I made because I'm not going to hide it. I will apply for the PPP funds. I went back and forth and back and forth, and do I want to be on the dole and all this other stuff, and is it really fair? And if nobody applies, then the whole program is bunk. And really, this whole situation should not have to be if they were more strategic about how they even address the entire pandemic situation. But here we are. People are forced to be at home. I can guarantee you I have lost revenue out of my business. We'll start with my workshop isn't happening this month, right? I've actually had higher than usual coffee orders, but revenue's down. And as I thought about it, if I was running my nonprofit right now, I wouldn't. But I'm going to get some of my tax money back. And until I get all the money back I've paid in, I decided I'm willing to go for it. So I have, my bank is still allowing applications. And so I'm going to put one in and see what happens. The worst thing that happens is nothing happens. Now, I'm going to read a couple comments from the YouTube live stream, which, by the way, we have a YouTube live stream. Hold on, Bill. Actually, I'm not going to read those yet, so I need to edit that. I thought one of you said something about paycheck protection. We will totally talk about your morale, though. I was hoping you guys were talking about paycheck protection programs, so you probably don't care. Keep you updated on what happens with that, just as my own experience. What I have learned so far is that I hate bureaucracy. I don't like paperwork. Basically, I wish the government would stay out of my business completely, and I may regret this decision. So we will find out. Okay. With that, it's time for our second segment. That's What's Up in the Garden. We have had, like, it was supposed to freeze last night, but it didn't quite. And I'm so glad about that. We may have actually made it past the last freeze. And we've had this wonderful week of like sunshine, nighttime rain, sunshine, nighttime rain, sunshine. Well, no rain that night. Sunshine today, rain tomorrow. If I would have gotten all my seeds in on Sunday, guys, would have been banging this week because that's perfect for germination, right? Don't have to add sprinklers or anything. But I didn't. So my goal is by the end of this weekend, I have all the seeds in the upper garden out there. I have everything in my aquaponics system. And then I have a bunch of stuff on the side of the hill. And then I've been aided by my chickens who figure out where I put seeds and then steal them back out of the ground. But in general, some stuff is germinating. We're doing okay. So the big thing is just pushing to get everything in the ground that we can, and then keep an eye on it with sprinklers or whatever so that we can keep that germination rate going and get the mulch in as soon as possible around the seeds after they've germinated to keep the moisture in the ground. Because here's how Tennessee works. Like, we're having this beautiful spring of rain and sun. Thank goodness. One spring we didn't have any sun and nothing did well. Talk about unsweet watermelons, by the way. If you don't get sun all summer long, just think of them as cucumbers. Just think of them as cucumbers if you ever have a year like that. They're still edible. You just can't think of them like they're watermelon. Anyway, so that's going well. And then the pepper plants are ready to go out. And I think I may put them out tonight or tomorrow. It just kind of depends. I need to look. We have one more, like Sunday night's a 40-degree night. And if some of that north stuff pushes down, it could freeze again. So I'm just kind of, I don't know if I should put the peppers out. But I got peppers in my hydroponics seedling system just like ready to go out. And I have 64 lettuce plants that need to move from my germination tray into my seedling grow out tray. And then finally my beets are up. But of course, chickens pulled a fast one on me. They've been using the beet bed as a dust bath area. So about half my beets are not up because chickens. And this just underlines the need to get that fence situation dealt with up there. So usually they're fenced out of my garden. Right now, there's a way they can get in, and they're getting in, and they're not even knowingly destructive right now. Like chickens are just destructive to your garden if you let them in. It's just that, there's this nice bare dirt area. I think I'll go take a dust bath here, without realizing you just messed up all. I mean, my beets are definitely not going to be in rows this year. We'll just put it that way. Okay, with that, it's time for the main topic of today's show. And I got a bunch of people online watching a live stream on YouTube who are already chiming in about wild plants they've found. One of them's really exciting. So, Homestead Glamour, Salima, our body butter lady, last year was weeding in her garden, found a mushroom that was a morel and threw it into the woods. And, all of us who like morels are going, no! So then yesterday, she put up a picture of a morel she found. And we're like, sweet, you got another one. She actually found 2 morels yesterday and lost one. I mean, you got to keep track of your morels when you have them. But then she was kind of afraid to eat it. And that's valid because there is another mushroom that looks like a morel that can make you have a tummy ache, and you don't want to have a tummy ache. So it sounds like she's still in the fence. Here's what she's saying. I don't know. I think I found a morel while weeding yesterday. Supposedly, if it's hollow inside, it won't kill me, but it doesn't have a stem to check for hollowness. The head of your morel is also hollow, so you should be fine with that, but I understand not wanting to eat a mushroom. So this is the perfect segue into wild foraging and getting started with wild foraging. The one thing you always need to have in mind if you're going to wild forage, and wild foraging is so gratifying, guys, is at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own plant identification. So that's the deal. And so if Salima's not 100% sure that morel is a morel, she should not eat it, right? Even though all of us are like, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Until she really decides it's a morel, she shouldn't eat it because, like, what if it is bad? Now, with that mushroom, knowing that the lookalike mushroom isn't going to kill you, it'll give you tummy ache. You could like cook a little nibble of it and see if it made you sick. That would be one thing you could do. But at the end of the day, when you're wild foraging, you really want to be confident of your plant identifications, not just with mushrooms, but with all of your plants you're looking at. So let's start with, why would you do wild foraging? Well, the obvious answer is because you can add a bunch of really tasty and nutritious food to your diet just by going out and finding things that grow. They just grow. And the more you learn about these plants and you learn how to cook them, you'll start wanting to actually eat them. Like, I look forward to watercress season every year. I'm super stoked. I look forward to oyster mushroom season every single year, right? So it augments your diet, and then that reduces your need to go to the grocery store for food or grow it yourself because it's just growing out there. That's a cool thing about elderberries. Like, I have an elderberry patch I'm looking at that we've mowed for years. I think I'm just going to let it grow this year. I'm going to let it grow, and hopefully some of those will give elderberries. This is the patch where I invite people to come at the spring workshop and just dig one up and take it home. It's just a wild plant. It was planted by bird poop, probably, sitting on that fence over there. It's a great way to augment your diet. The nutrients that are coming up in wild plants are coming out of wherever they grow. And so it's going to be a little bit different profile than what you'd find at a grocery store, which is so mechanized, right? And then in order to find wild plants, what do you have to do? In order to forage, you go out, you put your hiking boots on, you grab a bag and some scissors or a knife, and you go hunt stuff and go gather it. Well, while you're doing that, you're probably also walking or hiking. You're outside in the sun or in the rain or whatever. You're getting exercise. Like, there are so many benefits to just wild foraging. So that's another one. And I really think the confidence of being able to take care of yourself increases every time you learn a new skill. And wild foraging is a great skill to learn. In fact, I've got a whole bunch of plants that are wild that people would call weeds that I'm now cultivating on the side of my hill so that I can get my wild forage near my house if I want to, right? That's part of the fun. So if you're kind of new to it, though, and a little hesitant, here's some things you can do to get started with it. First of all, the easiest thing to do is just go out, find a local forager. and get to know them and start learning from them. I think the easiest way to get confidence about if a plant is edible or not, or really what you identified, is if somebody who already knows shows you and they show you the difference between that and, say, a plant that looks like that plant. Or take one of those wild edible walks. They have in our area, in almost every community, through community centers or the universities or the community colleges, it just depends where you are. Somebody almost always offers either a wild mushroom class, just like we're going to go out and look for wild mushrooms and I'll show you the differences, or wild edible tours. And they do it at the time of year when the things they know about are going to come out. Right now, there's a ton of spring things I know about that I can show you. Like, I was on a walk today on the road, and I see that blackberries and raspberries are about to bloom. That's cool. Now I know next we're going to have blackberries and raspberries off of those plants, and I'm confident in what those plants are, so I'm going to forage wild blackberries. Now, a lot of people are very confident on blackberries, but are you confident on watercress? So go out, find a local forager, and then when you have something, you can show it to them and say, "Is this watercress?" That's actually one of the first wild edibles I really figured out was wild watercress, and it was because one of my friends, Carly, likes to hike and she likes to forage. And she was doing a CSA and selling at the farmer's market, and one week she had watercress in all of her CSA baskets. And it wasn't something she quote unquote grew. Like, she didn't plant the watercress. She knew where the creek was that had the watercress. And so I got some and I loved it. It tastes kind of like peppery radish. So good. And then I get to look it around, guys. There's watercress all over around here for free. I didn't have to do anything at all. It was awesome. Or same friend, she reached out to me and she said, I just found way more oyster mushrooms than I can eat. Come on over. So I came over and she had foraged wild oysters. And okay, now mushrooms are scary because we hear about all the poisoning, right? From mushrooms. They always say there were old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but not old, bold mushroom hunters. Somebody said that to me the other day. So she handed me these oyster mushrooms, and I mean, this is somebody who's confident about foraging. I still was like, "So have you eaten from these ones already?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, and don't worry, and whatever." And then she started teaching me more just about wild foraging. And, you know, I was like, huh. You find a mushroom that's edible, you look it up, verify that it has all the characteristics. Then you go look at other mushrooms that look like it that might be poisonous that grow in your area and how they grow. That second step, that finding the lookalike, that's a key step to increasing your confidence, right? That's why Salima, if she doesn't know that that mushroom she found is really a morel, there is a poisonous lookalike that gives a lot of people tummy aches. Just saying. She probably doesn't want a tummy ache. Well, oyster mushrooms in our area don't have a lookalike. They do have a lookalike other places, but not here. And so that really helped with my confidence. She lent me a book about mushrooms. I took it home, and sure enough, next day, guess what I found? Oyster mushrooms here. And I picked them and I sent her a picture. She's like, "Yeah, those are oyster mushrooms." And then I got in my car and I drove 25 minutes to her house and showed them to her in person just to be sure that they were oyster mushrooms. And this goes back to be vigilant about making sure you know what you're eating is good. But if you have that resource, use that resource. And a really good place to find them are at the farmers markets. Your farmers who are out in their fields growing stuff also notice wild plants, right? So especially if you're in a small rural town, you can find somebody somewhere that knows about wild edibles. And they should be able to tell you, how to prepare them and all sorts of other stuff. Okay, that's the first thing. 2, do go to your local farmers markets and the ones in the small rural towns and get to know those farmers. The way I finally figured out what pokeweed looked like was because it was for sale at my farmer's market. And then I brought in a plant and was like, "Is this it?" And they're like, "Yeah, I have one growing in my garden right now that I really need to harvest and cook before it gets any older." Your local farmers, who are probably nearing retiring right now, know a lot about old-timey things that people ate. Lamb's quarter I see is mentioned on the YouTube. Lamb's quarter, I've heard so many stories from old timers in their 80s about how they prepared lamb quarter. It's a weed, basically. It's a weed that people do not want in their yard. It's delicious. I actually had to seed lamb's quarter here, and it still hasn't come up. Apparently, I don't have the best growing conditions for lamb's quarter. Don't know why. I'm gonna try again this spring. But lamb's quarter, really good. Poke week, really good. I wouldn't know that if I didn't have a local farmers market. And those guys have been in this area working their land their whole life, and their parents before them and their parents before them. That's a huge repository of information. Okay, third idea. Find a good resource and inspiration. So I've seen lots of wild edible books come out. And only, as I said, only you can really take responsibility for proper plant identification. A resource book, like a printed publication, is the thing to have, I think. Even with the website, you can go look online and you see this strange succulent growing and it's purslane in your garden, which is what happens here the first year. Once you till something, you end up with purslane coming up and it's edible. And you get mad because it's choking out the vegetables you want. Well, okay, pick it and put it, like cook it. And then you're done. There's another reason to have that there. Well, I was already well into learning about wild edibles. I was depending on internet searches. And so the problem is you go on the internet and you have a plant and you don't know what it's called. You just know what it looks like. And you know that you found it in Tennessee or Wisconsin or wherever you are. And then you have to try to find the keywords that's going to bring up that plant. And then you have to research that plant. And then you have to find out if it's the right plant. What a pain in the butt. And then you look at like Wild Edibles Tennessee. And so I'd done all of that. And my friend Jana was moving out of town. On the way out of town, she's like, here's this book. I think you'd really like it. And it was called Stalking the Wild Asparagus. I put a link in the show notes. Old book, like written in the 60s. I think 60s, 50s, but probably 60s. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, she handed me a whole bunch of stuff. I didn't have time to think about it. And then winter came. And eventually I picked up this book and I started reading this book. This book is the best wild food foraging book I've ever read. And not because it has robust resources with every plant you could ever find. It's because it covers the basic plants that you will find in much of the United States, including wild asparagus, right? It goes through elderberry, it goes through poke, it goes through chickweed, it goes through dead nettle, it goes through all sorts of stuff. Talks about mullein, and it has hand sketches, so it's not quite as good as pictures on the internet, but it's also just a good read. Like, if you don't do the read thing with your eyes, get the audiobook and listen to it. Because it's got a story throughout the whole thing. It's one of those books that it's not just like, here is my reference books to how to find wild stuff. No, it's just kind of got a story woven in of the author. And I think, A, that makes the information more absorbable. And B, it's my favorite reference for getting started with wild foraging. It's also inspirational. There's a point in there where they do a test where they go out for the weekend and they're not allowed to buy anything. Has to be all foraged, and there are 4 of them and they all head off in different directions with foraging bags. They have to either hunt it, trap it, or find it to eat it. And then they talk about what they do with what they find, stuff like that. It's really kind of fun. So I think it's really important to have a printed resource and then find inspiration in podcasts and other people and groups on social. Do use online plant resources because, once you've found the plants, especially if your resource is not, got hand sketches, it may or may not give you the confidence you need to make sure that you found Queen Anne's lace and not something more poisonous. I actually wouldn't eat Queen Anne's lace anyway, but whatever. And then, there's apps on your phone. Leaf Snap is the one I've heard about, but I don't know what apps you use. But you can take a picture of the plant, and then it will identify the plant for you. And then once that's happened, then you go look up that plant online and you verify based on everything you can find that it's really that, especially if it's the first time that you've ever seen that plant, because I have seen those apps fail. Like a friend of mine sent me a picture of what I think might have been poke, not 100% sure because it wasn't a great picture, and asked me if it was mullein. Although it might have been, no, it looked like comfrey, and then asked me if it was mullein. And I was like, that's not mullein. I don't know what it is. It might be comfrey because I can't see well enough, but definitely not mullein. And so you do, like, any of those identifications you have to be careful with. I'm in a mushroom identification group, and you can post a picture and they have rules about where and what you found it in and what angles the pictures have to be at. And they'll identify it for you, but they're pretty careful about making sure they tell you, like, just because we tell you that's an edible oyster mushroom, don't believe us. So, that's why you want to get more confident. I think that's why finding that live person who can be like, yeah, that's really cattail. You can eat cattail in the following ways, right? And Josh over on the YouTube stream just said PlantNet app. That's apparently what he uses. Okay. The fourth thing is learn about lookalikes and get to know them really, really well. Nicole needs to pause. Sometimes my voice does not obey me. It's probably because I haven't been to choir in weeks. I just talked about lookalikes. One of the things I really have fallen back on as I'm looking at plants is what looks like dead nettle, and is it poisonous? Or pokeweed, when it's little, you harvest the leaves and you eat it. And in order to eat it, you need to boil it 3 times in salt water, and then you cook it into your eggs. Although you get sick, but I've never tested that theory. Not going to do. Well, when it gets big, it gets in this big bush, and its leaves are a similar shape-ish to elderberry, and it has purple berries. Well, elderberry also turns into a big bush. You also should not eat the leaves, and has purple berries. These two plants look nothing like each other. A poke plant has a much more red stalk than an elderberry. Elderberries grow in these beautiful bunches, and they're tiny little berries, and poke has like a stem with berry, but like it's a long stem with berries on it, and they're larger. But a lot of people mistake one for the other and the other for the one. And if you do, you're going to be sad when you cook up a bunch of pokeberries and they make you sick. Now, farmers in the area say they will eat one pokeberry as a tonic to clean them out. So that tells me what kind of any of those, right? Why also farmer wisdom is helpful. So you really want to know what looks like it. And mushrooms really can kill you. So can other plants. There is an oyster mushroom lookalike. It grows in Japan and Australia. So if you live in those areas and you're hunting oyster mushrooms, you want to become familiar. It's called Omphalodus nidiformis. Hope I said that right. And you want to look that up and look at the differences between that and the various types of oyster mushrooms. There are a bunch of lookalikes to oyster mushrooms where they are basically different varieties on the elm oyster and, different kinds of oysters. And if you're trying to get a specific one, then the lookalikes are just other edible oyster-like mushrooms, right? That's a different thing than if there's a lookalike that's poisonous. In fact, there was a story in Tennessee where a Japanese family was here and they found shiitake mushrooms and ate them, and they were not shiitake mushrooms. And they were confident they had identified them because in Japan they looked that way. So if you're identifying mushrooms in a different place from where you are, you need to know what grows in that area because there might be something, right, that can get you. So learn the lookalike plants. 5, start with the basics. And this is where the YouTube stream has been really fun because I'm seeing orange daylilies, mulberries, mulberry leaf tea, Japanese knotweed, mullein, kudzu. Never eaten kudzu, but I've sure looked at a lot of it. I know it's edible. Purple dead nettle, stinging nettle, like all of these things. There are a lot of really low risk stuff you can start with. I say go dandelion. It's rare you meet somebody that doesn't know what a dandelion is and what it looks like, and there's not things that look like dandelions that aren't dandelions. You can make dandelion tea. You can have dandelion greens in your salad. Plantain. I don't mean the little banana out of South America. I mean that weed that grows in your yard with the broad leaves and it puts up a stem and it has a little seed top on the stem. And when I was a kid, we would pick that seed thing and we would fold it around and we would use it like a little seed shooting gun. And thus we made sure there was a lot more plantain in the yard probably than our parents wanted, right? Well, plantain's a great salad green, by the way, or you can saute it. And it grows in most lawns, much to people's chagrin. Now, if you have chemlawn on your lawn, you might not want to eat plantain if it's able to come up through that. Burdock, another green you can eat. Burdock, it's got a really broad leaf and a very long stem. And if you look at it online, you'll see. Mullein is furry and a lighter green color. It's not super dark green. It puts up a giant stalk with a yellow flower. When you properly identify mullein, it's almost like a furry tongue-like leaf coming out of it. You'll know what it is. You'll absolutely know what it is. You'll be like, is that mullein? No, I don't think so. Is that mullein? No. Oh, that's mullein, and I know it. That's one of those ones. So if you start by learning some of these basic plants, and if you get out and walk, you'll start seeing other plants, and it'll be like, that plant looks interesting. I'll tell you the one I learned this year that I never had bothered to research if the leaves were edible. I knew the flowers were. And that was violet. I'd always see these violet plants before the violets came, and I'd be like, wonder if that's edible. It looks like a lot of greens in one place, and I like greens, and I don't have a lot of greens right now because it's an early spring plant. But I never looked it up. And then this year I looked it up, and turns out people eat violet greens, don't get sick. They taste pretty good, and they grow everywhere here. Right? So if you get out, you'll just find, I call it like the plant is speaking to you. Sometimes it's not the plant you want speaking to you, though. So you want to make sure you properly identify things. And with the violet plants, like last year, I saw the leaves and I did a bunch of research and it didn't bloom. Yeah, it had not bloomed yet. And so I didn't know it was a violet plant for sure. And then it bloomed. And I was like, okay, now I know that's a violet plant. Next year I'm going to get some. Right? So that's kind of how that works. But I have found a lot of the time, I don't know if it's like a spiritual connection with the earth that we have. You'll start noticing a certain plant, or I'll start noticing, I'll just tell my story. I don't know what you do. I'll start noticing a specific plant and then I'll figure out what it is. And then I'll read the health benefits because a lot of plants have additional like immune system support, or they're good for congestion, vitamin D. I'll often find that I am lacking in that thing, and I wonder if my body somehow on a primitive level knows you need stinging nettle or you need plantain tea or whatever it is. Like the year I got pneumonia was the year that plantain was the thing I was all into, and then I got pneumonia and I needed the plantain, right? So that's the way it goes. And then my last piece of advice, if you're going to get started with wild foraging, is learn the basics, as I just said. And a lot of those basics can be found in most people's lawns. And then add 1 to 2 plants a year. Just choose a plant. 1 to 2 a year. Decide, I'm going to get to know spiceberry or, boysenberry or whatever. We have wild raspberries here. And if you add 1 or 2 a year, it's manageable. If you try to add everything at once, it isn't. The year I went into mushrooms, I learned 2 other mushrooms. I learned wood ear and I learned dryad saddle. And I learned them because I found them. And then I kept finding them. And then I kept verifying until I was really confident. And then the next year I went on to mullein. And then the next year I went on to, violet leaves. So every year I try to add 1 or 2 things I haven't really gotten comfortable with to identify that either has a medicinal use or an edible use. And a lot of things have a medicinal use, but they're not exactly tasty, but it's good to know what they are. So those are my kind of 6 getting started ideas. I think learning to identify wild edibles is really a gateway drug to independence. It's like a lifelong learning project, and it also inspires healthy walks. And who among us could not use a little bit more time out walking? Very few. I mean, I think Dixie does enough walking, but most of us probably could use a few more walks than we're getting. And I don't really see a downside as long as you know you need to take responsibility for properly identifying what you find and, try to have some fun while you're doing it, right? Okay, guys, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing, you can do it in two ways. Get your coffee over at hollowroast.com or become a member. That's at livingfreeintennessee.com. The biggest membership that everybody's really excited about are the webinars. So I think we're going to be keeping those as a primary focus of the membership. Just I've been hearing from members about how much they like them. So we're going to keep that going. It's not going to be weekly for the whole year, though, but it is weekly for April. And as I said, this week's webinar is the water systems at the Holler Homestead. That's tomorrow, Thursday at 12 Central. And I can't remember if we have one more Thursday this month, but if we do, next week we'll do one more webinar. And then we're going to back off the frequency a little bit. So with that, guys, go out, make it a great week. Nicole was so tongue-tied today. It's pathetic. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. See, I could do it on YouTube. I just couldn't do it on my podcast. There's that Paycheck Protection Program peas. Too many peas. Okay, guys, thanks for joining in. I loved your comments. It was fun to see. I liked Salima's story about the mushroom. Hopefully you got something out of that show. I'm going to get it up, and hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the live stream. And if you want to come to the webinar, you know how. Have a good one.